from suffering. And I know for myself, and as the Buddha spoke about, and I imagine for many people who start meditation, we often start because we have some sort of pain or suffering in our own lives. A wise man speaking. And so it's interesting being a teacher the last few months and meeting a lot of guests and residents and everyone coming into the interview room and talking, asking questions around wanting to get enlightened, wanting to find some sort of resolution, wanting to be free from suffering. And often you can ask them, well, what exactly is enlightenment for you? What is it you're trying to get? Or what is it you're trying to change? And usually it's, I don't want to feel something anymore. I want to feel something different. And a lot of us, I think, have this in our lives. We feel certain things that are unpleasant, hard to deal with, doesn't feel safe or supported to feel. And I know for myself, I spent many years judging myself and often still do, and feeling really alone, that I'm the only one that feels this. And how can I live my life when this thing is always haunting me? And why can't I just break out of it and just do the meditation technique like they tell me to do? And it feels like it's just me and myself and I struggling with this path. And yet when I really practice, it's clear that a lot of the pain isn't really the sensation or thoughts that I'm having, but a lot of times it's my fears, my doubts, the stories, the past, that are getting attached to all of these things. That Suzuki Roshi, who started one of the first Zen centers in America, had a saying that you can ride a horse, but you can't ride a horse on top of a horse, which is broken English. Might sound kind of strange, but his point was that you can deal with whatever experience you're having right now. But it's going to be really hard to try to deal with the story and the pain and fear and doubt about the experience you're having right now. You can't have the experience and have the fear of the experience, but you can just be with the experience. And it's interesting right now because I celebrated my birthday earlier this month at the monastery, and at this age, a lot of my old friends are married and having kids, and it's interesting talking to a lot of them that when they became a parent, or they knew they became a parent, or they're working with their kids, that I'm sure many of you have this experience much more profoundly than me, they report such a joy and love of having a child, that it completely transformed their life in a way they never imagined, and refocus their priorities in a way that they don't go to work just for themselves. It's not about, can I find the most interesting work that makes the most amount of money so I have the best status and can buy the best toys or something, but the work is meaningful in the context of raising a family. They suddenly really care about or very worried about the political, environmental situation that their kids are going to be raised in, and they find a new purpose and meaning that's not about themselves, but about their family and their child. And it's very interesting hanging out with a lot of my friends like that, who kind of just drifting through life, trying to do what's right, doing good work, but ultimately this deeper sense of fulfillment that's just visceral and very real just strikes them. And I had that experience hanging out with a lot of my friends' kids and my nephew and nieces, where suddenly everything I'm worrying about seems less important, and really care about what kind of world are these kids going to be born into and raised in. And one of the things we do in the spiritual path and doing this practice is enlarging the field of our identity, from caring about just ourselves, spending the necessary good work to deal with our own trauma, deal with our own pain and suffering. And as we develop the capacity to be mindful of our own pain, we can broaden our identity and our concerns to include our family, to include our community, and find a joy that's not based on just how I feel or what's happening for me right now, but based on a deeper joy of caring about others, being of service to other people. It's a lot more reliable and trustworthy source of happiness than if we're just focused on ourselves, which for a lot of us, we have to spend a lifetime still doing that good work of working on ourselves. But this deeper source of joy and compassion really comes from working in community and working with family and friends. Of course, even that can be challenging. There's a very classic story that I think I heard in my first meditation retreat a long time ago, about a young woman in her 20s, newly married, has a child, and is the love of her life. It's the joy and the light of her life. It's going so well. She just wants to take care of her child, and then when the child is 1 or 2, the child passes and dies, as happens. And the mother is so distraught and so devastated that she cannot accept the fact that her child has died. And she goes around to all the doctors and holy men asking for help. And my child is asleep, my child is sick, can you do something to help? And she comes across a Buddhist student. And the student says, you should go meet the Buddha. The Buddha can help you and help your child. You should go speak to the Buddha. I can't help you, sadly, but I think the Buddha could help you. And so she finds the Buddha and asks him for help. It says, something is wrong with my child. I don't know what's wrong. I'm really upset. Can you please help me? No one else can help me. Someone told me that you could help me. And so the story goes, the Buddha lovingly looked at the woman and told her that, yes, I can help you. I can help you and I can help your child. But first, I'm going to need something to help you and help your child. I'll need you to go to all the houses in the village, in your community, and I need 5 sesame seeds. 1 sesame seed from at least 5 houses. And if you bring those seeds to me, then I can help you and your child. And so the woman says, great, I can definitely do that. I'm sure I can get 5 sesame seeds. That's a good community. They would give me some help. I've already asked everyone. They all said they want to help me, but they didn't know how and they couldn't. So I'm sure if I asked them, I just need a sesame seed, that's something they could do. And the Buddha says, before you go, there is one thing, which is I can only get the sesame seeds from houses that haven't had death in that house. You need to find 5 houses where no child, no parent, no brother, no sister, no grandparents, relatives have passed in that house. And if you can give me 5 of those seeds from houses who have never met death, then I can help you and your child. And so the woman goes knocking on each door, asking for, I met the Buddha and he said he can help me and you were so kind in saying you would help me before but didn't know how. And now I know how. I just need a sesame seed. And sure enough, all the people are gladly saying, oh, I would love to help you. Yes, we can give you a sesame seed. And then the mother says, the only thing is, has anyone ever died in this house? It's not going to work if anyone's died in this house. And each house, the person says, oh, I'm sorry. My son has died. My mother has died. My brother has died. My sister has died. My mother has died. My grandparents have died. And so the mother goes house to house to house and slowly realizing every house in this village seems to have had death in their family. And bit by bit, her heart opens up and realizes that she's not alone in her grieving, that all of the families have grieved and lost, and she comes to accept the fact that her son has actually passed. And as the story goes, it goes back to the Buddha, grateful for teaching her this lesson, and with compassion and caring, becomes a student and moves on, grieves appropriately and moves on with her life. I think a lot of the material comforts we have these days, a lot of us don't want to hear that kind of story. It's really hard to accept that there is grief, there is suffering, there is pain and death, sickness, aging, for all of us. Even if not for ourselves, then the people we love. That just happens. It's not all that happens. There's still joy and there's still happiness, but it happens. Recently, we just finished a circling retreat at the monastery, interpersonal meditation form that some of you were at, including the residents. And I'm always reminded every time I do the practice, especially for a week, seeing the pain that a lot of us carry in our daily lives and the ways we find ways to cope with it. And for me, growing up, Korean American, kind of a poor family, having a lot of family issues, it was really easy to think, my family's screwed up, or my life is screwed up. There's other people that have good lives, and mine isn't one of those. And there's always this question of, well, maybe there's other people that are happy, and I'm just not. But then when I do practices like circling, I look around the room and I see people that are millionaires, I see people that are happily married, I see people from every walk of life, and in some way each of us have some anxiety, some fear, some doubt, some grief, some pain that it's hard for us to be with and hard to express and share in community. It reminds me of the universal bond and family that we all share, about that we're not alone. That's not just me. It's not this condition of being human involves both the bliss and joy of life, and also involves all the sorrows and griefs. And for me, when I come in contact with that, it's actually very enlivening, because it actually removes the false choice that I often think I have of, I'll just live. I could always just go back and live, quote unquote, a normal life where I try to ignore the pain and do things to just keep myself busy, and don't practice mindfulness and practice mindlessness instead. But when I'm really in contact and I really accept and see that, wow, everyone here has their own pain, and I can't just become a millionaire, I can't just get married, I can't just have a kid. Those won't solve those fundamental issues. They might give me more meaning, they might give me more purpose, they might give me more ways to serve, they might give more importance for why it's important to practice. But nevertheless, I always still need to practice, and I still need to really face reality. Not just for my sake, but because it's for everyone else too. And it became really clear during that retreat that the places where I'm limited, or the place in terms of helping other people, are often the places I haven't fully met in myself yet, that I'm not fully greeted and accepted and befriended those parts of myself are the parts that are most challenging to meet and befriend in others. And so it actually brought me to a sense of deep integrity and alignment to really accept that and feel the compassion that just naturally arises from seeing the pain that we all share, the common family that we're all a part of, and the deep commitment that I'm not going to just go off and find some other way that society says will make me forget about it, but actually deal with it because it needs to be dealt with. And fortunately, here we have a community and a practice of how do we meet those parts of ourselves and meet those parts in each other in a skillful way, without rushing, but also without hesitating. And despite all the challenges in life and all the environmental and political trouble we're in one way, if there's a silver lining, I think it would be that more and more of us are feeling that urgency and that need to really, we can't be really sleeping at the wheel, and we really need to find this deeper source of compassion and joy that comes from being in community and seeing that there needs to be a way to face this, and that willing to volunteer to choose to do that. And so I like to think for those of you who come here and for the people that train at the monastery, we proactively and willingly are willing to go to those places that can be scary and uncertain and not really know what to do in those times. But by coming together and really dealing with that, we can go beyond it and move from a place of fear and judgment to a place of confidence and hope, and really spread that way of being, relating, practice to our friends and family and our own communities, and demonstrate through our actual actions right now, through the way that we are, that there's another way to do this that doesn't rely on just book knowledge or a technological solution or new belief structure, but an actual fundamental shift in how we're able to befriend each moment, befriend each person, and out of a place from compassion really practice to resolve the suffering in ourselves and ultimately resolve the suffering for everyone else as well. So, yeah, that clock is always wrong. Very good. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. I covered everything I was going to cover. Well, more time to practice. Well, I'll just make the Q&A longer since I like that portion the most anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's hoping for.
So, let's do the practice. So during this time, if you already have a particular technique you're working with in your life or feel really called to do, feel free to continue with that technique, but I'll provide some instructions if you want to follow along. And if you feel like standing, shifting anytime, feel free to do so as gently and silently as you can. You can begin with our posture, straightening up and settling into our bodies, and taking a deep breath in and out. Returning to the present moment right now, allowing ourselves to trust and be with this experience right now. So for this first guided practice, we'll do some metta, loving kindness. Classical technique that has been done for thousands of years, generate loving kindness for ourselves and all beings. So silently in your mind, with a loving tone, gentle tone, you can recite in your own mind, may all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from hatred. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be truly happy. Truly happy. Say it once again in your mind. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from hatred. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be truly happy. Acknowledging that we too are a being worthy, deserving of these things as well. We can direct our attention on ourselves first. So in your mind, you can recite and feel, may I be free from suffering. May I be free from hatred. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be truly happy. Regardless of how you feel, you can recite these lines to yourself or even make up your own. The importance isn't so much how you're feeling as the fact that you are consciously, intentionally, gently setting these intentions. This is what you want. This is what you want to cultivate. If you want, you can use imagery, you can use memories. You can be really creative with this. Again, repeating, may I be free from suffering, free from hatred, filled with loving kindness, and truly happy. get distracted or lost, you can just start over. No need to judge or be harsh about it. Just forgive yourself, take a breath, and start over. So in a few moments, we'll move on to spreading this loving kindness to others. So you can say in your own mind's eye, if you wish, just as I wish to be free from suffering, free from hatred, filled with loving kindness, and truly happy, so too do all living beings wish for these things. Now you can bring to mind a loved one, someone that's easy to love. Maybe it's a family member, a partner, a friend, a teacher, a pet, alive or passed away. Someone you knew or someone you didn't know. Someone that's easy to love. Someone you already like, have an easy time thinking of. Holding their image in your mind, imagine them progressing through these stages as you say these words. You can say their name. In my case, may Soryu be free from suffering. May Soryu be free from hatred. May Soryu be filled with loving kindness. May Soryu be truly happy. Use memories or imagine them dancing or smiling. Bring one by one different people that you love and care about and sing these 4 phrases or any phrases you want to use or make up to wish them well, to wish them freedom. We'll do that just for a few minutes. Okay, good job. So now we'll change to those we may not know as well. Acquaintances, people we may meet regularly in our day-to-day life, those we may not have a very strong connection or relationship with, the cash register person at the store today, or your waiter yesterday. In your mind's eye, you can bring to your mind the image of these people, and one by one, wish them, may you be free from suffering, free from hatred. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be truly happy. However you're feeling is perfectly fine. Letting go of the desire to have a particular experience or feel a certain way. Out of service and compassion, wishing well for these people that you don't know very well. Cultivating the mind and the heart that wishes even these strangers to be happy, free from suffering, filled with loving kindness. Now, if you wish, bring to mind someone it's harder to be compassionate with. Maybe a family member, maybe a coworker, maybe a boss, maybe a past relationship, maybe somebody in the news. Someone that's challenging to wish them well. Not justifying their actions or behavior, but loving the human, the person, bring them to mind, and you can say these 4 phrases or any that you've created. And however you feel or whatever thoughts come up, you can allow those to occur and continue to wish them well, recognizing that their freedom, their happiness is tied to our own. That challenges and difficulties they've experienced or you've had with them is probably coming from a place of fear or ignorance or pain. And so see if we can wish them well. They may be free from suffering, free from hatred, filled with loving kindness, and be truly happy. Nice job. So now I'd invite you to broaden this loving kindness to include, say, all the people in Burlington. However you imagine Burlington and all the people, all the creatures, all the life that's here. Wishing that entire community that we may all be free from suffering, free from hatred, filled with loving kindness, and that we may be truly happy. Now see if you can broaden it even more. Include everyone in the whole country. Whether you envision a map or different people. See if you can wish everyone in this land that they may be free from suffering, free from hatred, filled with loving kindness, and truly happy. And finally, see if you can imagine the whole world, the whole solar system, the whole cosmos and universe, all of space and time. And wish that everything and everyone be free from suffering, free from hatred, filled with loving kindness, and be truly happy. And we can close by where we started. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from hatred. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings be happy. take a short 5-minute break. If you want, you can continue to do this practice with everyone you see silently or to yourself. Feel free to use the bathroom or get water or stretch too. So for this next period, we'll do what I'm calling for now, circling yourself. So continually asking yourself the question, noticing for yourself, right now, what's happening for me? How am I feeling? What am I thinking about? How's my body doing? If you ever get lost, you can just always ask, how am I doing? How am I doing right now? Maybe noticing some tension somewhere in the body. Maybe noticing some fatigue. Maybe noticing some flow and energy in the body. Whatever it is, just noticing what it's like right now. What you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Then as you notice what's present for you right now, you can ask the question, how am I relating to this experience? How am I holding this experience? Am I trying to get more of it? Am I not liking it? Am I trying to have a change, or am I wanting more of it? And if you're not sure, you can just ask yourself, well, what's it like to not be sure? What's it like to not know? How do you know that you don't know? In this technique, we're cultivating the awareness of what am I doing? How am I relating to it? How am I doing it? Allowing yourself naturally to change and move, and flow, but keeping awareness on what am I doing? How am I holding it? How am I relating to it? Then what's happening now? find yourself getting lost, forgetting the practice, you can always just bring yourself back to the present moment by asking, what am I feeling right now? Whether it's an emotion or just something in your body, noticing what's alive right now. If it helps, you can almost imagine yourself talking to your friend or a loved one, being curious about their experience. Just wondering, what's it like for you right now? No judgment or explanation or justification needed for how you're feeling. Just being present with whatever is coming up, being curious about how am I relating to this? Am I rushing? Am I hesitating? Am I pushing away or holding on? Am I receiving and allowing? How am I relating to this? And just like I want to push a good friend, just asking myself, what's it like right now? What am I doing right now? If a particular thought or emotion, particular body sensation, whether it's pleasurable or painful, flowing or tense, I would invite you to see if you can bring more awareness to anything that's consistently present. This particular emotion or feeling or thought or person that keeps coming to mind or keep feeling. See if you can incline your awareness to stay on it and notice just what happens if I keep my attention on this object that keeps coming up without needing to fix it or change it. What happens? If a particular object doesn't consistently show up, then just keep noticing whatever's alive in the present moment. For these last few minutes, I'd invite you to drop the question. And just allow yourself to more fully experience whatever's happening right now. Whatever activity or feeling. Have a more complete experience, a more full experience. Completely allowing, accepting, surrendering to whatever the experience is. If you feel bored, let yourself feel bored fully. If you feel happy, and without any shame, be fully happy. If you feel sad, allow yourself to feel fully sad. Whatever's happening, allowing yourself to experience that completely. So for the next 30 minutes or so will be a time for questions, reports, anything about tonight or in general, if you want to ask. Everything's fair game. So, is that a?
Are you looking at me?
Yeah.
I always have something.
Oh.
I found myself listening to the suggestion for the compassion meditation about getting rid of suffering and getting rid of hate. And it resonates with me that we have to have suffering in order to have compassion. And I wondered what it would mean if, I found myself meditating more on wishing for the people that I was thinking about to have the vulnerability to move through suffering, to move through hatred, to move towards happiness, and that if we didn't have that, how could we be compassionate?
Mm-hmm.
That was my question.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things there. So the way I understand compassion is the willingness and ability to be with others' being, particularly their emotions. And when I'm with another person's pain, let's say, there's a way in which I'm with them in that experience, and I'm wishing them to be free of that pain, and that pain that they feel touches something in me that oftentimes I share as well in some way. In this practice, I'm not necessarily trying to eradicate or destroy people's suffering or hatred, but it's more that, as you wisely pointed out, I'm wishing that they become free of them. And that might mean they have to process and work through it and do that work themselves or with others to move through that suffering and fully experience it and come to terms with it, just like the mother in the Buddhist story had to go to each house and really process and grieve and come to the realization that she was suffering. And there wasn't, she didn't have the option to bring back her child. So I can't just make someone stop suffering, but I can help support them in going through the pain of loss or grief. The Shinzen system, Shinzen being the mindfulness teacher that we use his mindfulness system at the monastery, he likes math and science. So he made a nice formula of suffering equals pain times resistance. So pain times resistance equals suffering. And so if I have 1 unit of pain and I have 10 units of resistance, I have 10 units of suffering. And just like Suzuki Roshi said, all of us can have the experience we're having now. That's something we can train and do. But we can't have the resistance and the experience at the same time. You can't ride a horse on a horse at the same time. So a lot of people confuse Buddhism to say life is suffering, that suffering is just an inescapable part, that everything is suffering no matter what you do. Everything, happiness is not real, joy is not real, pleasure is not real. Everything's just suffering, which the Buddha actually clearly says in the canon is not his view. That'd be nihilism. And there were people practicing that at the time that, with that belief structure, that everything is meaningless and pain and suffering. But the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism clearly state that there's an end to suffering, that that's a real thing that everyone can attain. And they can do it through practice, through good ethics, through good practice, through good community, through service, through good life, end suffering. Which doesn't necessarily mean that you end pain, because pain can still exist. Soryu once said, asked the different teachers, or asked his teacher, does a Buddha ever get sad? A lot of us go to practice because we don't want to feel sad, we don't want to get depressed, we don't want to ever suffer. And so we meditate thinking we can sort of pacify ourselves into bliss and never feel bad ever again. But I think the Buddha's teacher said, not the Buddha's teacher, Soryu's teacher said, It's an interesting slip. Interesting. Never happened before. Sory's teacher said, when the Buddha meets a sad person, the Buddha's sad. And so that would be compassion. We can meet each other's pains and joys and share in them without the resistance or with less resistance. And in that way, we can help each other process and move from suffering to experiencing just the pain and be free of that suffering. So I think he wisely pointed out there's definitely a process of being able to experience the wide range of emotions and experiences and not just try to bliss out and stay at some special state all the time.
So it would be over and over again, not that we ever get to the point where we never have suffering or...
I don't know. Conceivably, a fully enlightened person would have ended all suffering. I haven't personally empirically proven that for myself, but it definitely seems possible to do that more and more. And it seems to make sense that it would be possible to permanently end suffering. And to me, it's worthwhile to do any amount of that. So it's not an on or off switch. You know, it's good all the way through. Yeah. Raven?
What if you got to a place where you weren't experiencing suffering, but you just weren't experiencing anything? Where is that?
Well, that could be a lot of different things. Is that something you've experienced in meditation or just in daily life? Or? Yeah.
Or are you just like experiencing without anything attached to it?
What do you mean by not attached to it? Like no emotion or no reaction? Or?
Yeah, like complete non-reactivity. Where is that place?
Well, in my mind, there's at least two things that could be happening. There's probably more, but my mind comes up with at least two. One would be that a person can be really calm and focused and relaxed. At least in Buddhism, there's these certain absorption states that you can enter, really concentrated states, where it's pretty hard the person doesn't really react. And some of them are marked by a lot of ecstasy and joy, though. So in the lower states, a lot of people experience a lot of ecstasy, joy, rapture. And then the higher states, they say, that gets purified and calmed and relaxed to just equanimity, pure equanimity. All the way to the point that some people talk about things like infinite consciousness or experiencing just space. I'm sure everyone's heard these sort of stories of people who just experience like they're completely one with the universe in their experience, or they just feel like their consciousness is spreading out in all directions. That's a trainable skill that you can do. Um, Not necessarily awakening or enlightenment, but it's a good thing to cultivate and learn how to do. The 180-degree flip side of that would be, at least for myself, I remember in my early 20s, someone would ask me, what am I feeling? And I would go, I'm not feeling anything. I'm fine. I don't know why everyone else is so emotional, but I don't know, I feel stuff every once in a while, but that's usually when big things are happening. And for me, it took many, many years of unraveling and continually asking myself to feel and what am I feeling, before I noticed there's a very large, subtle emotional experience that I'm having pretty often. But in times of stress or challenge or habitual trauma or something, it's very easy for me to numb out and not feel anything.
Including pain?
Yeah. Not so much these days because I do so much mindfulness that that's pretty hard to do, but it can still happen. I think to a large degree the culture and society we live in, the systems of injustice work better if people don't feel things. Because if you don't grieve about the planet or the way we treat homeless people or not concerned about things happening in the world, then it's easy to get lost in status games or feed us stories of what matter because we don't have the sensitive tool to feel viscerally what really matters is essential. So I think to a large degree there's a power game being played out for people not to feel things. And so one of the reasons we practice is to get more in touch with not so much what we've been told or what we think is right, but what is really, what do we feel, what do we experience. That's something we can continually practice and train. So I'm not sure for a person, which one they're experiencing, but typically if you're in a very deep meditation where you're not reacting, it's often preceded by or accompanied by or related to, at least in time, a lot of joy and pleasure too. But everyone's experience is different, so I would be hesitant to make conclusive statements on anyone else's experience. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on, or does that seem good? Cool. Carol?
So one thing you said towards the end is about the resistance. I'm trying to remember what you said, but my question to you is, because my experience, just at least today, and I notice this happens not infrequently, that when I'm having a very pleasant experience, very expansive experience, I kind of freak out and I lock down against that. And I was just wondering what your experience is with that.
Did you have that during the guided meditation?
Towards the last part, I forget what the last questions you were asking us to do, but there was something you said that...
Like fully experience.
No, you're circling, self-circling.
Right.
We're doing self-circling, but what is it I'm experiencing?
Right.
I'm just experiencing what you're experiencing.
Right. And you felt sort of a expansion and pleasure.
Yeah, there was definitely an expansive, kind of very positive, I guess you could call it, experience.
Right.
But the minute I had it, it was uncomfortable to have it. and somehow there was resistance to it.
Hmm.
So, and that's happened to me before, it's familiar to me.
Right.
So I wondered what you do, if you ever have that and what you do with that.
Yeah, I definitely have that. I've experienced that. Still experience it fairly often. Yeah, it's interesting. I think for a lot of us, we're actually more used to feeling bad. We almost trust feeling bad, and feeling good seems confusing and like a stranger knocking on our door and he has a box of chocolate, but you're like, I don't. Where'd you come from? That's the image that came to mind. I don't know why. I think to a large degree, just the willingness to keep doing it is really good, and just telling myself that I can experience it, and noticing that, oh, I'm feeling good and expansive, and then noticing how am I responding to this, or how is my relationship to this. I notice there's a part of me that wants to clamp down. Maybe it's scared or confused, and then allowing myself to feel scared and confused and still feel good and expansive. If I change like fields to like another outside of meditation and Buddhism, there's a really good researcher that's pretty famous. I'm sure most of you have seen her. You probably might know her better than me. Brene Brown, that does a lot of research on vulnerability and shame and other topics. And she, I think, coined this word. I don't know if she did, but I read it in her book. So she said something called foreboding joy, where it's like, if I have joy, I'm just habitually trained or something to expect. The part of my mind's like, when's the other shoe going to drop? And it's like scared of, oh, I'm having joy. This probably isn't going to last. Something bad's about to happen. And that's one way that we, according to her, protect ourselves from from the pain that we've often probably experienced when we had trust or joy with ourselves or in a relationship or in a situation. I think to a large degree, their capacity to experience our pain allows us to expand their capacity for joy. And so the more present we are with our experience, the more range we allow. And oftentimes there's like, when I was in the retreat, a long retreat, I would continually tell myself when things were getting really hard that on the other side of this is probably like a great deal of joy and bliss waiting for me as soon as I get through it. And it might be hours or days or forever, but just to sort of motivate myself and remind myself that I might be actually resisting joy. It might actually be what's happening. A lot of times the pain I was feeling was, as soon as I got rid of resistance, it became joy or pleasure. So I think just really just talking to myself and allowing myself to feel whatever I'm feeling and let myself know it's safe and okay to feel joy and pleasure. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not, the Buddha said if you're going to get attached to something, you might as well get attached to the pleasurable meditation states. They don't really last, so it's okay to want them. It's okay to enjoy them. They're going to go away. So there's no reason to clamp them down or say that's an attachment or something. Mostly it's just trial and error.
Yeah, it sounds like everything else, it's kind of working it, just letting it. But working it by, I mean like just allowing it and noticing it and staying with it and kind of seeing where it sounds like.
I like the instruction. I think this applies to what you're talking about, but for me anyway, like to when it happens, just switch your focus to the sweetness of that, and just try to be curious about that. And
Yeah.
might even go somewhere sweet.
Yeah, it's interesting because to me, a lot of times it's almost like I was just talking to a guest a few days ago about this, where there might be some tension or pain, and then it transforms into like pleasure or joy, and it's so intense, it's almost too much. There's almost this like tingly feeling of like, I call it baby skin. It's like a really sensitive feeling. It's almost like if I got wounded and I put a Band-Aid over it, and now the wound is healed and I'm taking off the Band-Aid, but the skin is really sensitive and easily triggered or whatever. And I can only take so much, and it becomes too much, and then I just keep allowing myself to do it more and more, and it gets easier and easier over time. Jesse?
In this discussion of excitement or joy, I wonder about just paying attention to the other horse.
Could you say more?
Well, you have the horse of the joy or the excitement, and then you notice what is the other horse you're riding. I'm wondering if you're conscious that it is another horse, that it is an extra added addition or multiplication of not necessarily suffering, but an added complication to the simplicity of what you could be experiencing, and to maybe pay attention to the other horse. What am I adding to this experience? And is it valuable to just look at that? Am I about to sabotage this? In how? And what is the pattern? And can I watch that? And in the watching, is there a way to get to authentic experience of I don't even want to call it joy.
Yeah, I think one half of the practice is sort of learning how to concentrate and be relaxed with whatever experience is. But the other half of the practice is that that focused relaxation allows us, like you're pointing out, to gain self-knowledge. How does my mind work? How does my being work? What are the connections and relationships and causality of this comes up, and then this other horse pops up, and another horse pops up to that horse, and what's going on here? Yeah. And in my experience, if I have, let's say, a horse on a horse, a reaction to an emotion or emotion about emotion, in ideal circumstances, I can just let that go. And I'm back to one horse. Sometimes that's not possible. I can't do it. And so then I just stay with whatever the secondary or the tertiary or third, fourth, fifth thing that's happening is, and I just stay with that, and I'll work backwards. And it might change by the time I get to the second or first layer anyway. But I just stay at whatever level I can and have that experience. So if I'm meditating, I keep thinking, and I don't want to be thinking about stuff outside my practice, but sometimes it's not possible, so I just let those thoughts be there, and eventually they might quiet down, and then I can focus on my practice. But whatever the experience I'm having is the experience I'm having, and sometimes not being able to be on the first horse is the first horse. So that's okay. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
First of all, I just wanted to comment that it's interesting that, and I've had the experience too, where you start to feel something really positive and good happen,
Mm-hmm.
and we can so easily, oh, this is going to go away, the other shoe is going to drop,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the opposite, where oh my God, this terrible thing is going to last forever.
Right.
I just thought that was interesting idea, but I wanted to comment about the experience of this meditation. I had an extremely difficult time with the wishing no suffering. Just because I paid attention to the news this week and thought, if I'm not suffering, am I even alive? Kind of thing. But what I could do was wish for freedom from unnecessary suffering. And the unnecessary part then went related to the freedom from hatred. Because if I wish people to continue with hatred, myself to continue with hatred, then that's adding to the suffering. So I had to be pretty clear about what I was wishing for today.
Right.
And I find myself having to just qualify with unnecessary suffering, and even getting to the loving kindness was, wishing for loving kindness within myself, but then moving it outwards so that it's, finding it within myself, but finding it within other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's well put. An appropriate response to anyone that's really seeing what's happening would be sadness and grief. If we're not denying the reality of what's happening, then it makes sense. If a Buddha saw what was happening today, he would grieve. So in that way, we don't have to do this practice to pretend like everything's always just fine. Sometimes being free from suffering, unnecessary suffering, means allowing myself to grieve. And that's okay. Because otherwise that could be denial. And so feeling the grief is a good sign that I am a sane, emotionally healthy person. At least that's my viewpoint. I mean, other people might have a different take on what's happening, but my take is it makes complete sense that in an unhealthy society, that a sane, healthy person would grieve and be in pain at seeing what's happening. I think it might just be a difference of words, and so I think one form of suffering would be denying, would be deep down knowing that what's happening isn't good, and then denying it. And that would be suffering. And I think it's good to come up with your own sentences too. It's good to come up, I think each of us have our own particular dreams and visions and wounds, and it's good to adapt what we're trying to cultivate to address them. So happy you didn't stick to the script too much and did what was good for you. So I think that is the end. Thank you all for coming. We'll have some closing announcements.